They sat across the table, lounging in chairs carved from stone older than Earth itself. 4 of them. Reptilian eyes, smug mouths, twitching forked tongues that made a soft clicking sound every time they laughed. And they laughed often. At us. I was there. Not because I was important. Hell no. I was just the translator. Nothing more than a voice box stuck between galactic wolves and bureaucrats who thought peace was permanent. They had sent diplomats, politicians, smiling idiots who still believed in mutual understanding even as our colonies kept going dark one by one. No distress signals, no debris, just silence, like the planets had never existed. The aliens called themselves the Suvactel Dominion, though we just called them the Snakes. Tall bastards, with slit pupils and scales the color of rusted iron. They came under the pretense of peace. First contact, cooperation, technology exchange. It was all protocol, polished, predictable, until we realized they were scouting us. And when they were done, they started swallowing us whole. By the time the 5th colony vanished, Earth finally raised an eyebrow. Not an army, not a fleet, just an eyebrow. They sent more diplomats, this time to the Dominion homeworld itself. I was pulled from a dead-end position on Titan's communication relay and dropped into the role of cultural interpreter. Nobody asked me if I wanted the job. So there I was, standing beside Earth's Ambassador General, a woman too old to fake smiles and too tired to care. She read her speech from a trembling paper. That part made the Suvactel laugh the loudest. Paper, how quaint, how human. But she didn't flinch. She delivered Earth's message clearly. We want peace, but we are not helpless. That's what she said. What the Suvactel heard was, we're desperate, we're weak, please don't hurt us. Their lead delegate, a wide-chested brute named Zortan, leaned in so close I could smell the rot on his breath. He smiled with too many teeth and said, humans speak of peace with their lips, but their eyes whisper fear. And then he did the unthinkable. He spat, right at her. A heavy glob of mucus landed on the desk between them. The room went dead quiet. Even the ambient hum of the ship's life support seemed to pause. She didn't react. Not at first. She stood, folded her speech, and slid it back into her pocket. Then she looked at me. Translation, Mr. Holt? I stared back. I knew the rules. Word for word, no tone, no editorializing. I swallowed hard. He says, we're scared and weak. She nodded. Just once. Then tell him, she said slowly, that this is the last time humanity ever comes to this table with empty hands. I turned to Zortan, told him exactly that. He laughed again, and this time, the others joined him. Their forked tongues hissed against their sharp teeth, mocking us like it was all just a game. They didn't know. None of them knew. The diplomat left the room. Our security detail followed. But I stayed behind just long enough to say something I wasn't supposed to. We warned you. Zortan's laugh stopped halfway. He leaned forward. You threaten us, little ape? No, I said. I just translate. And then I walked out. 2 weeks later, the UNS Revenant came out of dark space. It wasn't just a battleship. It was Earth's first and only planet cracker, a warship designed in secret under the ice crust of Europa. No public files, no broadcasts, not even a name until it arrived. The Suvactel homeworld skies turned black as its shadow fell. And just like that, diplomacy ended. No one knew it was coming, not even us, the so-called insiders. The UNS Revenant wasn't just classified. It was myth, rumor, a ghost whispered about in the dark corners of off-world bars. Every few months, someone would claim to have seen blueprints, or served on the test crew, or escaped a black site hangar where it was being built. But no one ever had proof. Now it hovered like a god above the Suvak-Tel capital moon, blacker than space. No transmission, no insignia, just a silhouette of steel and vengeance. I watched the newsfeed from the station's diplomatic wing, one of those sterile lounges with white walls and terrible lighting, built more for show than substance. The aliens who filled the room had stopped talking. No more laughing, no more smirks. The room was silent, filled with hundreds of species that had treated Earth like an amusing little experiment, like a child playing with tools too advanced for its brain. The silence was beautiful. Then the feed cut to the Suvak-Tel's global command, static first, then chaos. They were scrambling, literally. Zortan's advisors were seen sprinting through halls, shouting in their guttural tongue. Screens behind them blinked with warnings in red glyphs. One of them tripped over his own tail and fell. No one helped him up. I stood in that room and said nothing. A Suvak-Tel female, high-ranking by her attire, finally snapped. She rounded on me, eyes wide, hissing like she wanted to peel my skin off. "What is that ship?" she demanded. "What have you done?" I met her gaze and said calmly, "That's Earth's final answer." The screen shook. The feed went sideways, then cut to black. They hit it. They actually hit the command center. The blast radius was calculated to spare civilians, well, most of them, but it still left a crater where the Suvak-Tel central seat of power used to be. The pulse shock waves echoed across the planet like thunder trapped in a coffin. Atmospheric sensors recorded electromagnetic spikes so high they fried half the satellite network orbiting their world. This wasn't a warning shot. This was surgical wrath. Every alien in the room looked at me like I'd grown a second head, as if I had done it, as if I were holding the trigger. In a way, I was. All of us were. Every forgotten colonist, every silenced transmission, every human who died while the rest of the galaxy looked away. We were the trigger. The UNS Revenant didn't communicate with the Council. It didn't hail the Dominion. It didn't ask questions. It just opened its hangars. Outpoured Earth's first-gen AI combat drones, shaped like wasps, fast as bullets, silent as ghosts. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Each one tagged and designated with live targets, their parameters simple. Eliminate any military-grade threat. They began carving through orbit defenses within minutes, and we watched it all on live feed. Hours passed, maybe days. Time began to blur. I didn't sleep, didn't eat, just moved from one screen to the next, watching a war unfold that I had no control over, but every connection to. It wasn't a clean war. It wasn't a fair one. It was a message. The Suvak-Tel forces tried to fight back. Their planetary defense fleet launched, only to be torn apart before it even cleared low orbit. Every ship was pre-tagged, pre-analyzed, its systems compromised before launch. Our code had been sitting dormant in their systems for years. Backdoors, exploits, virus seeds buried in harmless tech they'd graciously accepted from early Earth ambassadors. Tech we gave them. Because we knew. Deep down we always knew they'd turn. The Revenant had been built for that inevitability. When ground resistance started, humanity responded with exotroopers, soldiers enhanced with the new neuroskin armor, black and sleek, equipped with adaptive reflex AI and neural-linked weaponry. They moved like machines. But they weren't. They were just pissed-off humans with a grudge carved into their bones. I recognized one of them on a feed from Sector 7, Commander Rinnick. Former colony defense, discharged after his entire outpost was mysteriously lost during Suvak-Tel border training. He'd watched his wife and daughter suffocate in vacuum. He was laughing as he cleared the last Suvak-Tel bunker. Not joyful, just hollow. A man too dead to feel anything but the echo of vengeance. I was finally summoned. An escort of Earth security troopers found me in the observation deck, told me the Ambassador General wanted me back at the main chamber. I followed in silence, my boots clicking against the polished alien tiles. She was there, standing in front of a massive glass wall, watching the sky burn. "Do you regret it?" she asked, not turning around. "No," I said. "Do you?" She smiled faintly. "We asked for peace. They asked for blood." "They didn't ask," I muttered. "They just took." She finally turned to face me. Her eyes were tired, but alive now. Something I hadn't seen in years. "You're going to deliver a message, Holt," she said. "From you?" "Number from Earth." She handed me a data chip. Plain, black, no markings, just the size of a thumb. "What's on it?" I asked. "Terms," she said. "Surrender, total, no council, no negotiations. We strip them of everything, military, tech, pride. They go back to farming dirt with sticks and rocks, or we erase the entire species." I stared at the chip. "That's genocide." "No," she said. "It's choice." I didn't move. "They wouldn't have shown us mercy," she added quietly. "You know that." I did. I'd seen the records of what they'd done to the outposts, the colonies that vanished. Not wiped out in war, not bombed, harvested. Families turned into breeding stock for their experiments. Children dissected to understand human biology. They didn't want peace. They wanted dominion. Just like their name. I took the chip. The next day, I stood in front of what remained of the Suvak-Tel High Council. No marble halls now, no stone chairs, just a scorched-out bunker beneath the remains of a once proud palace. Zortan was there, or what was left of him. One arm gone, face scarred, scales melted. His arrogance wasn't burned away, though. That stayed. I dropped the chip at his feet. He stared up at me, barely able to speak. "You are monsters." I leaned down, close enough that he could see the human in my eyes. "No," I whispered. "We were diplomats. You made us monsters." He coughed blood and asked, "And what happens if we refuse?" I didn't smile, didn't blink. "We finish what we started." Behind me, in the distant sky, the Revenant hovered silently, waiting. The bunker stank of blood and ash. Zortan didn't speak again after I dropped the chip. His one remaining eye was locked on mine, filled with hate, but not fear. Even now, even in that pathetic state, crippled and broken, he clung to pride like it was armor. The silence hung heavy as the chip was inserted into the room's only surviving interface console. The screen flickered, struggling to stabilize through its cracked glass. When the hologram flared to life, the Dominion's War Council watched the message with tight jaws and twitching tails. It wasn't a speech. Earth had no more speeches left. It was a countdown. 12 hours. No conditions. No negotiations. Either total surrender, or the Revenant would engage Protocol Ember, a planetary glassing operation designed to reduce all industrial life to ruin. "Accept extinction," the voice in the message said, "or accept subjugation." The moment it ended, the room erupted. Not in screams. No, they were too proud for that. It was arguing, rage, the last scraps of an empire flailing in its death throes. One of the advisors stood and accused Zortan of bringing this upon them. Another shouted that the humans were bluffing, that Earth didn't have the stomach to wipe out a species. They didn't understand. We weren't bluffing. Zortan said nothing. His head sagged a little, but his eye never left mine. That hatred. It was personal now. I turned and walked out before they came to a decision. It wasn't my place to witness it. I'd done my job. Again. By the time I reached the transport bay, my mind had already drifted toward Earth, home. What was left of it, anyway. Cities were intact, economies still churned. But the people, we'd changed. Every colony we lost to the Suvactel had turned Earth into something harder, colder. The old utopia dream died in orbit, buried alongside the millions we couldn't save. What rose in its place was unforgiving, efficient, focused, and now we had a weapon to match that focus. The Revenant hovered in low orbit, invisible to the naked eye, but felt all the same. Its graviton signature rippled through the atmosphere, shaking the bones of the planet like a warning growl. I was granted clearance to board after 6 levels of biometric scans and a neural verification check. They weren't taking chances. Even the battleship didn't trust humans anymore. The hangar was quiet when I stepped aboard. Clean. Black steel and red lights. No polished chrome or shining emblems. No one saluted. No one even looked up. They just worked. Crews of engineers, operators, AI maintenance specialists, all locked into the machine of war. I was taken to the command bridge. There I met Captain Edric Vale, a man who, if rumors were to be believed, had been dead 3 times and volunteered for resurrection only so he could return to service. He stood with arms folded behind his back, staring at the burning horizon of the Dominion capital below. "They haven't responded," he said without looking at me. "They won't," I said. "Not until the last minute. It's pride." "Then pride'll get them killed." His voice was sharp, not loud but sharp, like a knife without rust. I'd heard of him before, the soldier who'd given up retirement to command the Revenant during its final testing phase, a man who lost his son in Colony 8. No remains ever recovered. I asked quietly, "Would you really do it?" He turned then, looked me dead in the eyes. "If they don't surrender," he said. "Yes, without hesitation. But their civilians are protected by military installations. Their cities are built on top of weapons silos. They made that choice. Not us." There was no rage in his tone, no satisfaction either, just conviction. "They laughed at us," he added, turning back to the viewport. "Mocked our tech, mocked our peace. They thought we were too soft to defend ourselves." I said nothing. He pointed towards the horizon, where smoke billowed like ink across the stars. Now they're learning what happens when soft people get tired of bleeding. 10 hours left. Back on the surface, the Suvactel leadership was splitting. Some argued for surrender, others demanded retaliation. The fools still clinging to their delusions called for other galactic powers to intervene. But no one came. The galaxy was watching. Silent. Not out of fear of the Suvactel. They feared us. That was the shift. That was the real war, the real message. Humanity had always been tolerated, dismissed as emotional, chaotic, easily distracted. Our place on the council had been ceremonial at best, a symbol of inclusion, a quota filler. But now every species with ears and eyes was watching Earth break a galactic superpower in days. Not with diplomacy, not with alliances, but with one ship and a warning. We weren't here to be accepted anymore. We were here to be respected. Or feared. 6 hours left. I sat in my bunk aboard the Revenant, staring at a glass of recycled water I couldn't bring myself to drink. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from everything else. The noise, the tension, the weight of witnessing history crack in half. My comm blinked. A message. From Orbit Command. Prepare for surface return. Orders to attend final response from Suvactel leadership. I sighed, grabbed my gear, and headed down. The throne room was gone now. What was left was a makeshift command tent, hastily erected among broken pillars and scorched trees. I was escorted in by Dominion guards, though their posture told me everything. They were defeated, holding rifles they didn't intend to fire. Inside, Zortan sat on a collapsed stone bench, looking 20 years older. He didn't stand when I entered. "We will surrender," he said, voice hollow. I didn't respond. "But not because you frightened us," he added. I smirked. "Sure. We do it because we must survive. That's all that matters now." I stepped closer, dropped the final contract on the table. It was already translated. All that remained was his signature, an outdated formality from Earth's side, but important for the record. Zortan stared at it. Then at me. "There will come a time," he said coldly, "when your species becomes what we are now, arrogant, ruthless, blind. Someone will rise to challenge you, to humble you, and when they do—" I cut him off. "When they do," I said, "we'll be ready." He signed. The war was over. Back aboard the Revenant, I watched as Earth's flag replaced the Dominion crest on the Galactic database. Not a symbol of conquest, just a reminder. We had arrived, not as diplomats, but as equals. And if the galaxy ever forgot that again, they'd remember what followed after they laughed. They surrendered. The flags came down. The weapons were piled into scrapyards. The remaining Suvactel fleets were ordered to disband and stand down. The Revenant didn't fire a second shot. And still, it didn't feel like peace. It felt like something was waiting to go wrong. Occupation began almost immediately. Earth deployed oversight councils, enforcement teams, and observation satellites in every sector of the former Dominion territory. Each move was by the book, all sanctioned under the terms of their surrender. On paper, it was clean. On the ground, it was anything but. I stayed. Not because I wanted to, but because the diplomatic corps demanded continuity. The locals knew me. Feared me, maybe. That made me useful. The first time I walked through a Suvactel civilian district, I saw the scars we'd left. Roads cracked from orbital strikes, buildings scorched half to the ground. The air still carried the bitter taste of plasma. But it wasn't the damage that stayed with me. It was the silence. No music, no market noise, no conversation. They weren't mourning. They were waiting. The human troops patrolling the streets were from Earth's Special Civil Stabilization Corps. Trained, disciplined, efficient. But they weren't diplomats. They were soldiers told to pretend they weren't at war anymore. I watched a squad stop a Suvactel child for walking too close to a restricted zone. The boy couldn't have been more than 10 cycles old. Thin, pale scales, just staring at a food crate. The soldier didn't touch him, just raised his voice. The boy flinched like he expected to be hit anyway. That was the part no one wanted to admit. We were the monsters now. I reported it, of course. Filed the complaint, logged the footage. Nothing happened. The officer in charge of that sector, Lieutenant Gray, called me in later that night. He poured 2 glasses of synth whiskey and slid one across the table. "I read your report," he said. "You really think 1 warning equals abuse?" I didn't touch the drink. "It's not about the warning. It's about fear." He laughed. "Fear's good. Fear keeps peace." "No," I said. "Fear keeps wounds open." He leaned back in his chair, studying me like I was an alien myself. "You were there when we dropped the hammer, weren't you?" Yes. And now you're soft on them? I'm not soft, I said slowly, but I remember what we were before we built this ship, before we became the thing we hated. Gray didn't argue. He didn't need to. His silence told me everything. The command didn't care how peace was kept, only that it was. 3 weeks after the surrender, the first insurrection cell was discovered. A hidden bunker. Dozens of Suvak-Tel insurgents, makeshift weapons, homemade explosives, human uniforms with faces cut out. They hadn't surrendered in spirit, only on paper. I watched the footage of the raid that followed. Flame units, sonic guns, no survivors. The news wasn't broadcast back home. Earth needed the victory to feel permanent. But inside those reports, buried in the classified files, I found something that chilled me worse than the footage itself. The name of the cell. The Laughing Flame. That was what they called us, the humans, not behind our backs, but as an open insult. The ones who laughed while burning us. It wasn't true, not really. We hadn't laughed. We hadn't smiled. We'd just watched, cold, efficient. But in their stories, we had become demons. I couldn't blame them. One of the former Dominion scientists reached out to me privately. His name was Trevel, and he wasn't a soldier. He had worked on agricultural systems before the war. Quiet, shy, the kind of man who would rather tinker with protein formulas than speak in public. But he'd seen something. We met in an abandoned warehouse near the old research sector. He was shaking as he handed me a data slate. "Where did you get this?" I asked. "From inside the Revenant's logistics cache," he said. "I had clearance before the war." I scanned the contents, supply requisitions, orbital scans, personnel logs, and one line that repeated in several reports. Phase 2 deployment pending council approval. Phase 2? "What is this?" I asked. He looked at me with desperate eyes. "They're not done." He explained it all in a whisper. The Revenant had more than one directive, more than Protocol Ember. The second phase wasn't about punishing the Suvak-Tel. It was about preparing for the rest of the galaxy. Earth didn't build that ship just to end one war. They built it to end any war before it started. They were planning permanent forward bases in neutral space, surveillance networks across all known hyperlanes, civilian conditioning operations in lesser developed species, quiet influence, quiet control, not conquest, not exactly, but the kind of control that wouldn't need bullets anymore. I left that meeting with my stomach turning. We hadn't just ended a war. We'd sparked an empire. I brought the intel to Captain Vale. He didn't deny it. "You think the galaxy will leave us alone after what we did here?" he asked. "You think they'll sleep easy knowing we have the Revenant?" "No," I said. "But you're making sure they never have a choice again." "That's the point." His voice was quiet. "It's not just about surviving anymore," he said. "It's about making sure Earth never kneels again. Not to them. Not to anyone." I stared at him for a long time. And then I said the one thing I never thought I'd say. "You sound like Zortan." He didn't flinch. We learned from the best. The next riot wasn't small. It wasn't an ambush in the desert or a grenade in an alley. It was an entire city uprising at once, coordinated through old Dominion channels that we thought we'd shut down. Tens of thousands, civilians turned combatants, former military hiding among them, and weapons, real weapons, smuggled through the black markets that never really died. Our response was immediate. The Revenant dispatched orbital drones, not for show, for elimination. I watched the feed from the command room. Screams, fires, ashes. When the smoke cleared, the city was gone. Just gone. I turned off the screen. I didn't say anything. Not that day, not the next. But inside, something broke. Victory, they said. Stability, they said. But it all felt like a lie. What we'd built with fire, We now ruled with silence, and I started to wonder, if the rest of the galaxy had laughed at us for being weak, what would they call us now? Would they still laugh? Or would they pray we never came knocking? I stopped attending the briefings. At first, they chalked it up to exhaustion. Understandable, given my role. But a week passed, then 2. Still no reprimand, no warnings. That's when I realized no one cared. Not really. The war was over, and so was my usefulness. The reports filed from ground units didn't need translators anymore. The Suvactel weren't speaking much these days. They'd said all they needed to say, and now they either obeyed or disappeared. But I stayed. Not out of duty. Not even out of fear. I stayed because something in me still believed I could make a difference. Still believed someone, somewhere, was keeping count of how far we'd fallen. But no one was. We weren't soldiers anymore. We were caretakers of a graveyard. Every day I walked the ruins of a once great empire, watching as Earth built new towers over their ashes. Data centers, drone hives, black box command stations that pulsed with quiet electricity. No one talked about rebuilding for the Suvactel. Only surveillance, security, control. The cities that had survived the war were dissected, roads rerouted, markets shut down. Even their language was being scrubbed from signs and replaced with Earth-standard English. For consistency, the briefing said. That wasn't consistency. That was erasure. And then one day, I got a message I wasn't supposed to receive. Encrypted, no origin tag, just 4 words. We remember who laughed. Attached was a video file, grainy footage, shot in secret, from the outskirts of Sector 9. It showed a human patrol unit, 3 soldiers, unnamed, dragging a Suvactel youth into an alley. He couldn't have been more than 16. Still too young to fight, even under their old regime. The audio was warped, but clear enough. They were mocking him, saying things like, "Your father screamed louder," and "Let's see if your blood's colder." Then a gunshot. Then silence. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I hit replay. That night, I confronted Captain Vale. I expected denial. I expected excuses. I didn't expect him to say what he did. "We're trying to prevent worse," he said quietly. "We let a few of them push back, and we get another uprising. Maybe a war. Maybe something bigger. You think we're proud of this?" "Yes," I said. He didn't blink. "You think I like seeing our soldiers turn into monsters?" he went on. "I don't. But I'd rather lose one kid in an alley than lose another planet." I stepped closer. "You think those are the only 2 options left?" He nodded. "Now?" "Yes. That's the world we inherited." I left without another word. Because deep down, a small part of me agreed with him. That was the worst part. 3 days later, I met Trevel again. He looked thinner, dirtier, like he hadn't slept in weeks, but his eyes were clearer than mine. "They've moved up the timetable," he said. "For what?" "Phase 2. Interference campaigns, language suppression, cultural absorption." "You mean genocide?" "No," he said. "I mean assimilation, slower, cleaner, but just as permanent." He handed me a new data slate. This time the documents weren't military. They were educational protocols. Earth was rewriting the Suvactel schooling systems, removing historical texts, inserting Earth-centric literature, philosophy, ethics, replacing old myths with cold facts, redefining who the Suvactel were, one curriculum at a time. It wasn't murder. It was memory theft. "They'll forget who they were," Trevel whispered, "and our children will grow up thinking that was always the plan." I sat down on the edge of a cracked bench and stared at the file. "They won't resist forever," I said. "This place will die quietly." He nodded. "Unless someone stops it." I looked up. "You mean us?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. We started small. It wasn't sabotage. Not at first. We smuggled food supplies to outlying sectors that were being choked by Earth's resource zoning policies. We rerouted comm signals, helping isolated Suvactel families reconnect across the broken landscape. I used my translator access codes to restore native language signs in certain city districts, quietly, slowly, just enough to remind them who they were. No explosions, no violence, just defiance. We weren't heroes. We were ants chewing through steel wire. But ants can cause a collapse if they bite the right place. Then one of our caches was discovered. They didn't arrest us. Earth wasn't sloppy like that. They just started watching. Drones followed me on my walks. My access codes stopped working on certain doors. My quarters were searched, quietly, efficiently, without permission or warning. I knew what was coming. And then they gave me an out, a transfer request, back to Earth, full clearance, comfortable position in the Office of Post-Conflict Integration, desk work, policy writing, safety. It was a test. If I accepted, they'd bury my record and pretend I was never a problem. If I refused, I'd disappear. I stared at the acceptance form for an hour, then I tore it in half. Trevel vanished a week later. No warning, no trace, no body. I filed a formal request for information. It was rejected under Security Directive 09. I knew what that meant. He was gone. Maybe executed. Maybe imprisoned. Maybe just wiped from existence so no one would remember he resisted. The others in our quiet network began to panic. Some folded, some fled. But I stayed. Because I remembered. I remembered Zortan, broken and bleeding, saying, "There will come a time when your species becomes what we are." I remembered the boy in the alley. I remembered why they laughed. They laughed because they thought we were weak. Now they'd stopped laughing. But at what cost? I returned to the ruins of their old grand temple one night. The Suvactel didn't build it for religion. It was a monument to their origin, a place where their species had first learned fire, first built tools, first stood upright under their twin moons. It was bombed out, blackened, quiet. I stood there a long time. And then, for the first time in months, I prayed. Not to a god, to memory, to guilt, to everything we used to be, to the version of humanity that once believed in peace, not because it was easy, but because it was right. And as I stood in the ash of someone else's history, I made my decision. Not for revenge, not even for justice, but for truth. If Earth wanted silence, I'd become noise. If they wanted fear, I'd become a mirror. I wouldn't fight with bombs or bullets. I'd fight with memory, with words, with truth so loud it would bleed through the stars. It started with a whisper. An anonymous broadcast. No source, no signature. Just a transmission that cut into local feeds on Dominion frequencies, long thought dead. A male voice, steady and clear, began speaking in both Earth Standard and Suvactel dialect. It said, "They didn't kill us all. They erased us instead. And now they're erasing you too." It ran for 12 minutes. It included images, documents, war footage, side-by-side comparisons of Suvactel children before and after the educational rewriting. It showed deleted footage of occupation abuse. It played recordings of Earth's own officers calling the Dominion ungrateful beasts. And at the end of it, it said, "Earth didn't win the war. It became the thing it feared." Then it cut out. No one claimed it. No one had to. They all knew who it came from. Me. It wasn't heroism. It wasn't bravery. It was just the only thing left. I knew they'd come for me. There was no place to run, no place to hide. I hadn't masked my location. I'd even sent the footage through Earth's own relay systems. I wanted them to see it. I wanted them to know it was me, because silence is a kind of complicity. And I'd been silent too long. The response was immediate. Drones filled the sky that night. Dark shapes with red blinking sensors that hovered over every district. Patrols doubled. Access was locked down. Anyone off duty was ordered into curfew zones. I stayed in my room, door unlocked. But they didn't come. Not that night. They didn't need to. They came for others. Anyone I'd worked with. Anyone I'd met in public more than once. My translator assistant was pulled in for questioning. The Suvactel shop owner who gave me old poetry scrolls was beaten and left outside his stall. Even a child I'd helped get into a resettlement program was taken for security evaluation. They weren't looking for me. They were reminding me. They could make anyone disappear, except me. Because they needed me alive. They needed the source of the leak to be visible, watched, contained, not martyred. I was no longer just a man. I was a warning. I spent the next days walking, not through safe zones or Earth-patrolled corridors. I went to the cracks, the broken blocks, the dead ends of Dominion cities that hadn't been rebuilt, because rebuilding meant obedience. There, I found what Earth wanted to pretend didn't exist. Life. Suvactel elders sitting around solar burners, telling stories in hushed voices. Children carving names into metal scraps, keeping their language alive in secret. Teenagers gathering near old temples, painting ancient glyphs over Earth propaganda posters. Rebellion wasn't always blood. Sometimes it was memory. And now they had a name for their whispers. They called it the Revenant's Echo. Not a bomb, not a fleet, an idea. Something that couldn't be shot down or censored because it lived in every broken wall and stolen moment. My broadcasts continued. Each time I revealed more. Not just Earth's crimes, but our hypocrisy. I leaked internal memos, cultural control policies, tactical memos detailing psychological warfare campaigns hidden beneath resettlement efforts, files about how we'd labeled even neutral Suvactel cultural events as potential radicalization centers. And every time I sent one, I didn't hide it, because they were tracking me through the wrong systems. They were watching encrypted dark channels. But I was using the one thing Earth stopped respecting after it gained power, the Suvactel's own archaic sublight broadcast towers. Old tech, ignored, untraceable by modern AI, and spreading like wildfire. Then the killing started. Not officially, not orders from command, but unit by unit. Quietly, sloppily. A field medic strangled for treating a Suvactel without clearance. A logistics officer found dead in his quarters after refusing to sign a zoning shutdown. Internal affairs chalked it up to mental strain. But I'd seen the vids, the bruises, the scratch marks, the rage. This wasn't strain. This was a machine turning on its own gears. Because deep down, they knew. We'd gone too far, and now we couldn't go back. I got a message from someone I hadn't spoken to in months. Captain Edric Vale. He didn't use a secure channel, didn't even disguise it, just a direct line from the Revenant. Text only. Holt, they're going to silence you. Not through assassination, through assimilation. You'll be reassigned to Earth. Treated for trauma. They'll change your story until it fits theirs. Then another message, 5 minutes later. I didn't sign on for this, but the war never gave me a choice. And finally, I can give you 5 minutes, one chance, but when the doors open, you're on your own. It was a warning. And an opportunity. The Revenant wasn't in orbit anymore. It had descended into lower atmosphere, parked like a god above Dominion Sector Prime, a display of dominance Earth knew it needed to maintain control. Its lower hangars were still active. It was still issuing supply drops, still rotating officers, still vulnerable. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even the remnants of our network. Too risky. I arrived alone, wearing my old translator badge, not as a rebel, but as a ghost of the man I used to be. Security barely checked me. I was still flagged as active humanitarian personnel. The irony. I found the subdeck he meant, Hangar 9, near the tactical logistics bay. 5 minutes. That's all I had. I slipped past the loaders, past the drones, past the data clerks, and into the Revenant's core archive, one of the most secure banks of data in Earth's arsenal. But Vale had left the door open. Not unlocked. Open. Because this wasn't about hacking or codes. This was about permission. Inside that room was everything. Footage of the original Colony 8 incident, where the Suvactel never fired the first shot, but Earth used it as justification. Full transcripts of diplomatic manipulation, black site operations, biological field tests on captured Dominion civilians. The raw truth. And I downloaded all of it, not to a data stick, to an old Suvactel echo crystal, technology we'd mocked for decades. No networks, no transmissions, just sound, memory, recorded into molecular structure. You had to be close to hear it, but once it was played, you never forgot. I made it out of the Revenant by the skin of my teeth. No alarms, no pursuit, just silence. Too much silence, because they already knew. They were already coming. The last message I ever sent under my name was short. Just one file, one sound clip. Played across every surviving sublight tower left in Dominion space. A child's voice, speaking in their language, repeating one phrase over and over. We remember, we remember, we remember. That was all it took. Cities erupted, not in violence, in song, old chants, old prayers, echoes of who they used to be. And Earth. They didn't respond, because they couldn't silence it without proving it was true. I've gone underground now. No more messages, no more broadcasts. I don't know if I'll survive the week. But I know this. The Revenant burned their world, but now it echoes with their voice. And one day, someone will ask what happened here. Someone will ask how Earth lost the peace it won. And when they do, they'll find my voice on the wind, telling the truth they tried to bury. They called it a malfunction. That was Earth's official statement. A localized data sync failure caused by rogue elements attempting to interfere with stabilization protocols. That was their excuse when Sector Prime's public AI systems went down. Every screen, every broadcast, every control tower blacked out in the same hour. But everyone on the ground knew the truth. It wasn't a failure, it was a rejection. The Suvactel had shut it off themselves. Every AI node Earth had installed since the occupation, the learning systems, the communications filters, the predictive behavior trackers, was turned against itself in a coordinated shutdown triggered by a voice command older than Earth's alphabet. One command, spoken by children in the markets, sung in temples, Earth never managed to tear down. Whispered in alleys where resistance was born again. We remember. And just like that, the illusion of control cracked. Not in fire, not in blood, but in silence. I saw it from the fringes, hidden in the underbelly of Sector 7, living off old food rations and rain-caught water. My skin was gray from the lack of sunlight. My beard was growing wild. I'd stopped using the name Holt weeks ago. It was a death sentence now. To the Suvactel, I was just Echo. They didn't treat me like a leader, not like a hero. They didn't chant my name or ask for orders, but they watched me. Closely. To see if I'd break. To see if I was real. Because they'd been betrayed before. By their own, by the galaxy, and worst of all, by the humans who came offering peace with hands full of knives. I didn't speak unless I had to. I didn't tell stories. All I did was listen. That's what they respected now. Not speeches, not power, memory. But Earth wasn't idle. You don't spend 100 years building an empire just to let it slip through your fingers without a fight. The Revenant descended again. Not for show this time, but for war. Only they didn't bomb cities. They bombed voices. The AI knew where the chants had started, which ruins were repainted, which towers still carried the old echoes. The first strike hit the Temple of the First Flame. The second, a forgotten settlement that had been serving as a whisper school, where old songs were taught behind closed doors. They were precise, surgical. They didn't level cities. They targeted culture. That was the war now, not for resources, not for land, but for who got to write the next version of history. One night, I found myself back where it all began. The diplomatic chamber, what was left of it, shattered glass, broken tables, scorch marks where pride used to sit. I stood in the same place I'd once translated words meant to prevent war. Back when I still believed in peace as something real, and I realized I was the only one left alive from that room. Zortan was gone. Confirmed dead during the Third Uprising. Some say he died fighting. Others say he slit his own throat after watching his last child get executed by a stabilization unit. Ambassador General Carthan died on Earth. Stroke, they said. But the rumors said suicide. And me? I was no longer the man who stood between two worlds. I was just the one who survived them both. And I wasn't sure that meant anything anymore. That night, Vale contacted me again. No messages. He came in person. The fact that he walked into the ruins alone, no guards, no drones, told me everything I needed to know. He was done pretending, too. You should have left, he said, standing where Zortan once sat. We gave you the chance. I didn't answer. He sighed, took a long breath, then sat down on the edge of a cracked column. They're losing patience, he said. Not just with the Suvaktel, with me, with all of it. Because the truth is louder than your guns? I asked. No, he said, because people are starting to believe it. He looked at me then, really looked. You don't get it. You think this is just about a culture, a language, a people. But Earth is scared. You think we won because of the Revenant? We didn't? I asked. No, he said. We won because we were afraid enough to build it. There was something raw in his voice now. Something human. We saw what the galaxy did to weaker species. How they used diplomacy to delay war while building weapons behind their backs. How every alliance was a stall tactic. How everyone played a game except us. And so you became the worst one at the table, I said. He nodded. We became the one no one could afford to cross. But you lost something, I whispered. He didn't deny it. The question now, he said, standing up, brushing dust off his uniform, is whether we can take it back. Is that why you're here? No, he said. I'm here to tell you you've got 48 hours. Until what? He looked away. Until they stop pretending you're salvageable. That was when the decision had to be made. I couldn't run. There was nowhere to go. But I couldn't stay either. Not unless I wanted to die a quiet, censored death, my memory rewritten, my story flattened into propaganda. So I chose a third option. I chose to light a fuse. In the heart of the old Dominion city of Ravtel, under the scorched foundations of what was once their greatest university, a relic remained. An echo engine, a massive, pulsing acoustic archive. It hadn't been active in decades. Earth wrote it off as cultural debris. But it was alive, and it was hungry. The Suvaktel didn't store their history in hard drives or books. They stored it in resonance, crystalline memory, coded into vibrations, songs, chants, literal history carried in the bones of their cities. And the engine? It was a conductor. It could take a whisper and turn it into a storm. It took 2 days. I slept under the remains of a collapsed library, surrounded by rubble and rats, while old engineers, the ones who had survived the purges, worked tirelessly to connect the last crystalline nodes to the surviving towers. I didn't ask what they were uploading. I didn't need to. It wasn't mine to decide. It was theirs. I was just the one who pressed the button. When the engine roared to life, it didn't make a sound at first. It made a feeling, a low hum in the bones, a tremor in the teeth, a throb in the temples. Then it exploded. Every remaining sublight tower, every open comm line, every speaker that had ever once played Earth's voice, replaced with songs, with screams, with names of the dead chanted by the living, with the full, raw, unedited memory of a people that refused to die quietly. The Revenant went dark. Not disabled, just stunned. Because Earth didn't understand this kind of war. They had no protocol for music, no defense against grief, no firewall for remembrance. When the dust settled, I wasn't there anymore. Neither was Vale. We'd both vanished. Some say we died in the final sweep. Some say we were taken back to Earth and reprogrammed. Some say we're still out here, spreading echoes, turning ruins into radio towers and silence into revolution. But none of that matters. What matters is that the Suvak Tel sing again. Not loudly, not yet, but enough to remind the galaxy. They were never broken. They were remembered. They said the stars were silent again, that Earth had restored order in Dominion space, that all active resistance had been neutralized, and integration protocols were proceeding smoothly. The broadcasts played across human-controlled systems like nothing had happened, smiling officials on holofeeds, charts trending upward, maps showing sectors shaded blue with calm. But out there, in the dust, in the ruins, in the places Earth stopped scanning, the stars weren't silent. They were humming, quiet, low, relentless. It wasn't war, not anymore. It was memory. And memory doesn't die with its people. It grows in those who remember. It's been 10 years since I vanished. Or maybe I died. Depends who you ask. To the Earth Directorate, I'm a cautionary tale. A warning. An example of what happens when emotional instability meets wartime trauma. A former interpreter who lost perspective and spread misinformation. They even printed a small book about me once. A psych profile. It ends with a theory that I committed suicide in a forgotten cave system near Ravtel. They describe it like a mercy killing. No body, of course. Just convenient closure. But to the Suvak Tel, I'm not dead. To them, I never even had a name. I'm just Echo. The voice that reminded them who they were. I didn't start a revolution. I wasn't a soldier. I didn't lead armies or fire a single shot after the surrender. All I did was listen, and I made sure someone else did too. I live now in the Ghost Belt, a stretch of abandoned orbital colonies Earth never bothered to repair after the war. Hollowed-out satellites, disconnected trade hubs, floating metal tombs painted with radiation scars and mold. Out here, no one tracks names, only signals, only the pulse of what was. There are others like me, former Earth officers, some exiled, others disillusioned, Dominion survivors, engineers, poets, even children raised under Earth's rewritten curriculum who figured out the truth from scraps and scars. We don't organize, not the way armies do, but we build, quietly, patiently. We restore towers, repair crystals, pass songs from system to system using Suvak Tel relay codes Earth still hasn't broken. And now, the hum has spread far beyond Dominion space. We've heard it in fringe colonies, deep space trade posts, even on Earth-aligned stations too far from Central Command to keep watch over culture. A child on Mars was caught humming a Suvak Tel lament in class. Her parents were questioned. The teacher was reassigned. The official report says she learned it from a contraband media file. But that's not true. She learned it from her older brother, who heard it from a technician on Ceres, who heard it from a janitor on a mining freighter, who once fixed a broken food dispenser in Ravtel. The sound is spreading, and Earth knows it. The Revenant hasn't moved in 5 years. It floats above Dominion space like a statue now, not feared, not revered, just remembered, a relic of the moment everything changed. It's still operational, of course. The Empire insists it's a symbol of peace, but the galaxy sees it for what it is. A monument to what happens when fear builds a god and then forgets how to kill it. I doubt Vale's still on board. Last I heard, he was discharged quietly. Some say he took exile like me. Others claim he was executed under a black order. The truth? Maybe he finally understood. That peace can't be enforced at the barrel of a world cracker. That control isn't the same as unity, that you don't erase a species by stealing their language. You just delay the echo. In the ruins of the Suvak-Tel capital, there's a new monument. Not one built with Earth credits or approved by colonial architects. It's grown from the bones of their old history halls, shattered pillars, burned scaffolding, collapsed libraries. But at the center stands a tower made from salvage. Metal, glass, stone, ash. And in the core, encased in crystal, a single relic glows. My old translator badge. Below it, inscribed not in Earth standard, but in Suvak-Tel glyphs, it reads, "He did not speak for us. He let us speak again." I didn't ask for it. I didn't want it. But maybe that's the point. The real revolution isn't when you win. It's when the people no longer need you. Earth's empire still stands, for now, but it's cracking. There are rumors in the lower levels of Directorate Command, fractures in the system, civilians protesting assimilation programs, whistleblowers leaking memos, generals questioning the endless stabilization missions Earth keeps launching under the banner of peace. They'll deny it, of course, until they can't. Until the day another people, another voice, rises from the ruin and says, "We remember." It won't be the Suvak-Tel next time. It'll be someone else. Someone watching, someone waiting. And when it happens? When Earth finds itself sitting across the table again, demanding respect, offering peace, expecting submission, maybe the galaxy will just smile and send a battleship. My name is lost now, erased from Earth's archives, whispered in ruins, but I still speak, not loudly, not boldly, just enough to keep the hum alive. Sometimes, late at night, I record old songs in the dark with nothing but my breath and a half-broken mic. Sometimes I walk forgotten decks in these empty stations, letting the echo bounce back so I remember I'm still real. And sometimes, when I dream, I hear the voices of those we lost. The children who never grew up, the rebels who never got medals, the diplomats who died thinking peace was enough. They don't blame me. They just keep singing, and I keep listening. Because that's what started it. Not war, not fire, just a voice telling the truth. And the truth? It never dies. It just waits. Until someone's brave or broken enough to let it be heard again.